We are ready to rumble. Well. Welcome to MonstaTV. I am Fred, your friendly neighborhood alien. And today, we're going to be a little bit more serious, on the serious note once again. But I mean, I found these videos from Kait Willit. And she does some really good research and has a particular way of putting things together. She talks real, quiet and stuff, but I think that's because she has kids and she has to do it while the kids are asleep, something like that anyway. And it's amazing, her statistics and all the information she brings together. That's quite something. Now we've got two videos from her today, and they kind of go hand in hand with one another, because the first one is about how men have left the scene. Women are starting to see the damage. Yes. And the second one is about Schopenhauer and how he was right about women all along, in a way. Now, we've got something to say about that here, of course we have, but since there's two videos, we're going to get straight into it. So let's move along, and here we go.
The good men did not leave with a fight or a goodbye. They left in silence. They stopped initiating, stopped spending, stopped chasing. And by the time anyone looked up, well, the room was already empty. In a 2026 survey of more than 5,000 single adults, only about 30% were actively dating. And roughly 3 out of 4 women had not been on a date in the last year. That is not a shortage of good men. That's a market where the buyers stop showing up. And the men, well, they've been signaling why for over a decade. In the app data, in the debt numbers, the loneliness stats, in the earnings reports of the companies built on male desperation.
This kind of stuff is really serious, right? I mean, it just doesn't get more serious. And then they laugh about men, and what do they call them? Incels and all the rest of that. This is about to backfire really heavy, as I've already mentioned several times about the female loneliness epidemic. Now, she's going to pick that apart now, and all the little bits and pieces that are responsible for that. She's a little bit on the side of women, but we'll kind of even that out.
This is the timeline of exactly when the good men checked out, what they were doing instead, and what the market looks like now for the people who are just finding out that it had an expiration date. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the men who had options were the first to walk, and why almost none of this happened in secret. Reason number 1 is the one that men give before any other: the effort to reward ratio. The average man spends about $68 on a date.
Effort and reward. If I put way more effort into it than the reward that I'm getting from something, obviously it's not worth it. And women are not worth it. They're just not. I mean, what do you have? You have a companion that nags at you all the time. It's just the weirdness of it all. If the women are the prize, then we have really, outdone ourselves by fooling ourselves. I mean, it is absolutely crazy. Because you don't have anything from a woman unless she gives you children, unless she gives you peace, right? And sex, obviously, and is a good partner. But if she is demanding and all the rest of that, you have nothing from this.
And that's about 20% more than what the average woman spends. And the same research found that it takes about 7 dates before any interaction turns into a standing couple.
I think that statistics about how much women spend on a date is not about the date. It's probably about the makeup she's paying for and all the rest of that. She's probably calculating that, which is not calculated by the men, just the sheer what he's paying, the costs of actually for the dinner and so on.
So that's about roughly $700 just to find out if somebody's going to stay. And that's if every date leads to the next one,
Okay, I kind of skipped that just to recuperate, because I kind of talked into it. So if it takes about 7 dates and you have about $100 per date, that's about $700 just to find out if she even wants to be with you. But most dates don't even get that far. So you've just spent money for nothing at all.
Every date leads to the next one, which it doesn't. Here's the number that should stop you. 21% of men have gone into debt from dating. For women, it's 9. So men are more than twice as likely to go into debt trying to participate in a market that rejects them most of the time.
I think those numbers are skewed. Seriously, 21% only. of men have gone into debt, and 9% of women. I think that's too high, and I think that the number of men have gone into debt for dating is too low. But it depends on the sample size that they have, and also how the numbers are skewed by other variables that they kind of calculate into the whole thing.
Get better. He opened a calculator. I mean, the cost of staying in a game is higher than the reward that you can expect from it. Leaving is the rational move. That's not him giving up. That's exit behavior. And it's the most logical thing a person can do in a losing equation. The math only broke because his odds were already terrible. And those odds, they weren't random either. Reason number 2, the invisible majority, aka the reason that his odds are bad in the first place. 2017, an engineer from Hinge ran the numbers on how likes actually move on that platform. Not a podcaster, an engineer. With
Hinge is a dating platform for those who don't know.
all the data in front of him, half of every like that's sent to men went to the top 15% of men. And the top 1% of men, they pulled more than 16% of all likes on the entire app. The men who perform on the bottom half of the platform, they're fighting for scraps. And at the time, this wasn't even new. OkCupid published almost the same picture back in 2009 on their own blog before they quietly took it down. And women on the site rated 80% of men as below average looking. 80% below average. Think about what that does to the word average.
That's crazy, right? 80% of men are below average looking. And then imagine how many women are going for those 20%. It's just absolutely crazy. And none of these women are getting them.
If 80% of people fall below it, that word means nothing. Because what we're really saying in all of that is that the majority of men are invisible. Again, that data from 2009 and 2017 sits in plain sight for over a decade. Meanwhile, the market just kept getting worse. Now, here's where we're going to address the lazy part of this argument. So stay with me. I'm not saying women are wrong for having preferences.
Oh, no, of course not. Why don't you ever say women are wrong for having impossible preferences, okay?
Everyone has preferences. That's not the problem. The problem is what this machine did with those preferences. Because these apps, they never showed women the real market. It showed them the top 10 or 15% on a loop, the most polished profiles it had. And as a consequence to this, and a whole generation quietly recalibrated what is normal to the top of the distribution. So these men, they didn't get rejected, they just got erased. And here's a psychological reality that nobody wants to say out loud. Invisible people, yeah, they stop showing up. When the feedback that you get is silence year after year, eventually you believe the silence and you leave. That is the invisible majority of men. Being erased is one wound. The next point is what enough of that silence actually does to a person over time. Reason number 3 is rejection exhaustion.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, look, men, we're like used to being rejected, okay? Now, I didn't have that bad luck to be rejected often. I planned my things out pretty well. But the point is that, like, what would you say? What would you calculate? 80%, 90% of all approaches that you try is a rejection. And even if you don't approach, you see or you notice whether you're being rejected or not by the way you get ignored or looked down upon or stuff like that. Now, the thing that's a big mistake for men is to judge their own worth by how women react to them. Because women have no clue what the hell they're doing and who they are and what the hell is going on. They don't even know what we think is beautiful. They don't know, right? They just think, oh, it's sexual, that's why they have their tits hanging out. Whereas most of us men find that absolutely appalling and disgusting and it just turns us off completely. Put that away. What the hell are you doing?
And this one is not at all about money. It is about repetition. When I poll my own audience, these men describe it the same way over and over. It's never one big rejection. It is 1,000 small silences. The match that never actually says anything. The conversation that dies at hello. The date that goes well and then nothing. Or they plan an entire date and get ghosted the day of. No reply, no reason. And there's a name for what that does, and it's well documented. Learned helplessness. When an animal or a person gets enough outcomes that they can't control, they stop trying, even after the situation changes, and trying again might actually work.
Yes, because of the position it puts you in. Women would say that way it makes you feel. And as men, we can't deal with helplessness at all because of the fact that we know there's always something to be done. So helplessness doesn't help us, right? So we just leave it all standing and go for something completely different. which she mentions right now as well.
Too late. And a lot of women will respond to this as if it's just male weakness.
Of course, because look, you know what women do all the time is here, the finger pointing and just blaming. It's always the same. That's why you should never listen to women about men. Now, okay, we're listening to a woman right now, yes, but you will notice here and there that she's not actually blaming women for the shit that they do. Right, there's always some sort of excuse. There's nothing wrong with preferences. Well, there is actually something wrong with completely, ballooned up preferences that are off the charts. They're not preferences, they're sheer arrogance. Okay, so the words need to be adapted and things need to be adapted so that you get the actual picture. Women are vain as hell.
It's not. That's a documented response to an environment where effort and reward got cut apart from each other. And the man's version of that response is simple. He stops sitting at a table where the food never comes. More exit behavior and the same cold logic underneath it. Now, exhaustion explains why he stopped trying. The next point is where he went when he left. And it's not where everyone assumes. Reason number 4 is that the alternative became competitive because this whole lonely loser story gets it all backwards. The assumption under almost every conversation in the dating market about men is that the men who leave must be miserable, completely lonely, depressed.
Incels and so on and so on. But that's not true. MGTOW, men started organizing shit for themselves and, went to the gym and get into their work and their job and their education and stuff like that.
That if a man just stops pursuing relationships, then something must be wrong with him. Because she is the prize, obviously. But that's not exactly what happened.
Yeah, and she's not the prize, by the way. I like the way she said, obviously. Obviously, she's not.
What if, hypothetically, he compared the two options that were in front of him and he preferred the second one? For most of human history, the alternative to relationships was isolation. But today, that alternative can be a full life. Friends, purpose, travel, entertainment, fitness, goals, community. A man now can build an entire life without ever having to go on a date.
Yeah, and we call that MGTOW, men going their own way.
And that changes things. Because once the alternative becomes good, relationships stop competing against loneliness. They start competing against what men want most. Peace. Now, again, hold on. Think about that for a second. Our relationship is no longer competing against an empty apartment or a silent phone. It's competing against a Saturday morning workout, a group of close friends, a hobby that he loves, financial freedom, a career that he's proud of, a life that he already enjoys. And giving all that up for you? Well, that's a much harder sell. Because
yeah, and by the way, the more he does that, the more he becomes attractive to women. Because it's not really how a man looks that is the actual attraction for women. Now, it does play a part, but it's much more the fact that he has himself under control, that he has a purpose in life and stuff like that, right? That makes him attractive, that he has some place to go. So he is actually, having women for sex here and there, but he's not into commitment. No bloody way would he commit, and why the hell should he?
When a man spends years hearing he's not tall enough, not strong enough, not successful enough, not attractive enough, just simply not enough over and over and over again, he steps away from dating and discovers he has more money, he has more time, he's less stressed, there's fewer disappointments, and he has complete control over his own schedule. So now the question changes. The question isn't why he left, it's why would he come back?
Now I really like this part. It was so sweetly unexpected, So why would he come back? Why the hell would he? And come back to what, by the way? For real now. What is she going to offer him? Nagging? That kind of nagging? You're not enough? It's about you have to earn me. You have to earn my love, my sex, and so on, right? Get out of here. That has nothing to do with love whatsoever. That has nothing to do with a kind of a type of partnership, right?
And that's the misunderstanding. A lot of people imagine these men sitting alone in their parents' basement, just wishing, praying to God that they had been chosen. And the truth is, a lot of them stopped waiting to be chosen and just started building.
Started living.
Gym, the business, the friendships, the mission, the experiences, the version of them that stopped depending on somebody else's approval. And once a man builds a life he genuinely likes, something very important happens. You can't
just in case you hear some noises, there's the gardener.
Motivate him with false promises anymore. You can't motivate him with potential. You can't motivate him with maybe, because he's already holding on to something real. And that
And imagine, now we have companion robots that you can have sex with, that are nice to you, that you can have any conversation with, that, you know, can be your secretary as well, because they just scan the internet for you, because it's AI, right? This stuff is going to, there's a pinnacle to this, and then all of a sudden, right, women are just out. Because who cares about children? You know, men did care. But if it's like that kind of an effort and there's no reward, as you just said, why the hell would you? And coming back to what, right? Then, you know, what would you take a robot? Well, a robot for what? That's the point. If you can't have this is the only type of thing that's left, right? And men will find, because they don't dare, you know, they don't need that much input, because they're way more of an output, men are, right? They do things. So they only need a certain amount of input. And if the woman says, well, you know, is that all you need? Well, that's really, you know, a small thing. That doesn't say anything good about women, because women's effort wasn't very big to secure a man. All they needed to do is shut the bloody hell up and be nice.
That's what so many people missed. The competition was never about other men. The competition became the life that he built after playing a losing game. And for a growing number of men, that life is winning. Because if this was only a handful of bitter men on the internet, that number wouldn't move. But the next point is where these men already voted, and it shows up on the balance sheet. Reason number 5 is that the market already priced it in. Because if men were truly in the way that we pretend that they are, companies built on male spending would be fine, but they're not. Bumble, their paying users fell almost 10% in a year. Their total revenue down more than 7%. The company that owns Tinder, it watched its paying users peak around 11 million to now under 9. These apps, the money, it was built on men. Men were the overwhelming shares.
Oh, it's the same with bars, clubs, any place, in fact, cinema, right? Any place where men would take women and they would pay. Any type of single events now is actually women paying. They have to pay to participate in a single event, because the men are so scarce, and men don't have to pay anything. Men are not paying anymore. They're not into these women, because they're whores. They just become whores, and you know, to go to a place and let themselves be told you're not good enough. Why would a man do that?
Of people who were paying. And the whole model was built on the assumption that men would keep paying to be seen. And of course, when men stopped spending, the industry started shrinking. Bumble, whose entire identity was built on the idea that women would message first, yeah, they had to walk that back and let men start the conversation. The founding promise that they made, yeah, that was gone the moment that the money was gone, because exit behavior also shows up on the earnings reports. The men already voted with their wallets years before anybody made a video about it. So whether or not they left isn't the question anymore. We've shown that in 6 ways. Every single point so far has been about what men did. Now, the hardest part of the video is the one question that nobody's really allowed to ask, and that's about the other half of the room. Now, this is where the video turns. The one-way mirror is not another reason men left. It's the reason that the one conversation that could have fixed all of this never happened.
And the reason why men are not coming back. They're not. And even herself here, Kait, is not going to help men coming back to the table. They're not going to do this. Because women are gotten so vain, so arrogant and entitled, it's not bearable. It's insufferable. You just can't stand it. All you have to do is watch a show like whatever podcast, or what's his name? Myron Gaines' show, Fresh and Fit. And you just say bye-bye. I don't want anything to do with these women at all. And to find an actual woman that has, that is enough humility in her and is interested in a real togetherness, that's going to be very difficult.
There's a bias in psychology called the self-serving bias. It's one of the most replicated findings in the field. Baumeister documented this cleanly in 1990. When something goes wrong, every single human being tends to read their own part as circumstance and the other person's part as character. So I was completely stressed. Look at all I had going on. But them, no, that's their character. They're just selfish. And the truth is, everyone does this. Men do it, women do it, you do it, I do it. But here's the part that you need to hear. A relationship, it survives that bias for one reason. Accountability runs in both directions. He looks at his half, she looks at hers, and the dynamic, it self-corrects when necessary. But over the last few decades, we built a culture where accountability only points one direction. Because looking hard at male behavior, well, that's recognized as commentary. But looking hard at female behavior, that's an attack. That's misogyny. That's the patriarchy. Unacceptable. It's the same mirror, same question. In one direction is a TED Talk, the other one gets you a label. That is the one-way mirror. And it's not any one individual person's fault. It's in the air that we're all breathing. But pay attention to what this does to two people. If only one of them is ever asked to look at their own half, well, the other half never gets looked at. And in the unexamined half, that is where resentment grows, quietly, for years, until one person leaves and the other person swears they never saw it coming. Now, I'm gonna say this part is me, not as the research. I am not perfect, and I certainly have my moments of doing this. I could be in a disagreement with my husband, and I could be dead certain that I'm being the one who's reasonable as a woman. I know that's funny. Anyway. And the only reason that we're able to climb out of that is that somebody in my life, my husband, who I respect and trust more than anybody, is allowed to look me in the eye and say, you're not being reasonable here. And that permission, the one where you're allowed to be told that you're wrong by somebody that you love and trust, and you know that they're doing that while also holding their half too, that is the whole thing. That's what makes it work. That is what keeps a person honest and a relationship functional. But again,
Yes. But good luck trying to implement that. Good luck.
and here we are. It's 2026, and we took that permission away from an entire group of people, and we just called it growth. Now, here's the receipt for what that costs. Stevenson and Wolvers, through the National Bureau of Economic Research, tracked women's happiness across 35 years of widening freedom and widening options. And they found it went down, both on its own terms and in comparison to men. In the 70s, women reported being happier than men. By the 2000s, that flipped. So we have more freedom, more options, and yet we're less happy. And I don't think that's because the freedom part of it was so bad.
Well, you see, the thing is, if you are, this is the weirdness of it all. Women think that if they are something special, then lots of men must be after them, right? And that would make them feel special. If you ever noticed, women always talk about men. They don't talk about a man, right? It's always men. And if they have trouble with one man, then all men are responsible. That type of thing, right? And but you're not. You're something special if you found the one man. Then you're special. Because something special has happened, because only this one man and this one woman actually fit together. They're actually made for one another. If you're compatible with like all these men, you're nothing special. You're just a whore.
I think it's because nobody handed women the other half of that deal. The part where more power, more freedom also comes with more responsibility, layers of accountability. And it means more of that, not less. But
every man knew this, by the way. Men didn't get any type of, what would you call it? Well, they didn't get any more power, or they didn't get any more rewards without the actual responsibility, right? So that went hand in hand. Women, they just wanted more power without any responsibility, and it was like when it's about feminism, that movement started right away with privilege. Okay, that's the word I was looking for. So more privileges, more responsibility. Those things go hand in hand. So it's like that in the army. It's like that in every structured societal group where you have hierarchy, right? That you get more responsibility, but you also get more things that you can do and that you're allowed to do, and so on. Privileges. So this is the whole thing. Women the feminist movement started with privilege. Okay, they were allowed to vote without being drafted, because that was the only reason why men were allowed to vote, because they were going to be drafted, and so you had to give them something for that, right?
instead, the message was that the standards could go up, while the self-examination and self-awareness, that could go down. And the truth is, no system survives that. And again, this isn't because women in general are uniquely flawed in some way.
Oh, there is. Yes, there is. Women have unique flaws which are women flaws, female flaws. Of course there is. And there's unique flaws that men have. Why don't you ever do that? Why don't you ever actually say those things, Kait? What the hell is wrong with you? Yes, you have certain flaws that come with being a female.
But it's true that the unexamined half will rot in anybody. And we let half the room skip the process that keeps people honest. That is where the good men went away from. Because the conversation that could have fixed this, well, it was called an attack. So it never happened. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us in a reality that nobody really wants to acknowledge.
Now, fucked.
Because the truth is, I don't think that most men left because they absolutely just hate women. They left because they stopped believing that their efforts would even matter. That is different.
Or because they hate vanity and entitlement.
Hatred is emotional. This was arithmetic because every relationship runs on the same exchange. Effort for appreciation, investment for reciprocation, responsibility for influence. And when one side feels responsible for everything and appreciated for nothing, eventually the math breaks. That is what happened. And once it breaks, people don't always leave dramatically. Sometimes they leave quietly. They stop approaching. They stop pursuing. They stop volunteering. They stop explaining. Then one day,
And they stop paying.
everybody looks up and wonders, where'd they go? And the cruel irony of all of this is that the men that women typically wanted most were the first ones to be capable of leaving. The disciplined ones, the responsible ones, the men with options and character. These are the men who could build a life with or without a relationship, a meaningful life. Because those men, they looked at this whole market and this entire dynamic and they realized something incredibly uncomfortable. The reward being offered in this dating market, getting a woman in this day and age, it no longer justified the cost of participation. So they directed their effort elsewhere. And once a man then builds a life that he finds incredibly meaningful and that he truly enjoys, he becomes very difficult to motivate with promises, especially promises that he no longer believes. And that's the part that I think the majority of women are missing. The competition in their world was never other women. The competition is the man's own life. Because the truth is, Jim's not going to criticize him. His mission, it doesn't ghost him. His hobbies, things that he enjoys, yeah, they don't tell him, yeah, you're inadequate. And his friends, they don't make him earn basic respect. And if your answer to that observation is anger, you have missed the entire point of this video. Because
Yes.
anger is what happens when feedback feels like an attack. And feedback is exactly what this culture stopped allowing. The greatest lie ever sold to modern women was not just that men are unnecessary. It was the idea that standards could rise forever, where self-examination could also completely disappear, that their expectations could continue to increase while accountability decreased. And the idea that every disappointment that they ever experienced in their life was somehow everyone else's fault but theirs. That every failed relationship only has one side that's worth examining. No system survives that, no marriage survives that, no person survives that. Because the moment that you lose the ability to ask, what was my part in this? You lose the ability to change anything. Again, the men already told you why they left. The data was public, the warnings were public, the outcomes public. None of this happened in secret.
That's
And
right.
this one-way mirror is sitting in plain sight. And while everybody was busy analyzing men, judging men, criticizing men, correcting men, explaining men, a lot of men just simply stopped participating. And not because of all the reasons that women like to create for men, simply because they no longer saw a reason to. And that's the part that people are finally starting to discover. Because good men didn't just disappear, they adapted. And adaptation is what most people do when the truth stops working. Now, if you liked this video, then I think you'll like this one too. And if not, then respectfully, fuck off.
Fuck off. Respectfully, of course. Yes. Amazing stuff. So, that's why these videos go together, because what actually happened, right? I mean, what happened here, and on a deeper level, is quite interesting when it comes to how women behave when you let them. It's the same for men, by the way. That as soon as you're allowed to be an asshole, what do people do? Only a small amount of people will refrain from that and say, you know what, no, I don't want to be an asshole. I just don't want to be. You can allow me to be one all you want, but I don't want to be one. Very little people will do that. So if you give women the chance to be as arrogant as they want, they're going to take the whole plate, you know? So that's what's kind of happened. So we always have this question going around on the internet, where have all the good men gone, or where have all the men gone? Where are you guys? And I love making those videos. I love putting those videos together, or looking for a compilation, and that kind of comes across funny and is fun to watch. But I mean, there's something deeper behind this, and philosophers have, all philosophers, by the way, all good philosophers, have talked about women in a certain way. Of course, feminists would say in a negative way, or are misogynistic, like, for instance, Schopenhauer. Now, I've talked about Schopenhauer before, but I think on the German channel, we've talked about him. But today we're going to have a look at what she put together about Schopenhauer and the group of women, in the sense of that when women want their safety secured and stuff like that, how they need to act amongst one another, the actual sisterhood. You see, the actual sisterhood has nothing to do with feminism at all. In fact, feminism would hate this kind of sisterhood. So we're going to let her tell us about these pillars of the actual sisterhood that would be needed for women to secure their own safety, and not just their safety, but their well-being as such. And if they whore around, and if they become the women that they are today, what actually happens? And it's a really interesting video she put together here, so we're going to get right into it. Here we go.
In February 2026, a woman invited 400 men into a mansion and slept with as many as she could, on camera, for money. Then, she announced she was pregnant with 3 possible fathers. No idea which. Her name is Bonnie Blue, and this isn't about judging her. She is the clearest picture that we have.
Even though she is an unbelievable whore. I do respect Bonnie Blue for other reasons, but I don't respect her as a person as such, right? It's just that she, as an actual complete whore, is more honest than some of the OnlyFans girls, or some of the girls that think themselves to be Christians and shit like that.
Have around what modern dating has become. Now here's what this video is going to uncover. Women have never been less emotionally aware about a relationship, and as a consequence, men have slowly backed away from committing, and for many, they've stopped showing up completely. Nobody trusts anyone, and the most connected generation in history is the loneliest ever recorded.
So that's how we put these two together, right? That's why we're going from this one video that we just had into this one, because we want to get into the background of this on a philosophical, psychological level. Like, what is actually behind all of this? Now, the reason why I kind of like this is because it has nothing to do with religion at this point, right? I believe it goes even deeper than this, but we have to start someplace, okay? So this is the philosophical depths of Schopenhauer.
And while it might feel random, it isn't. It's one system collapsing. And a philosopher named Arthur Schopenhauer predicted this whole thing in 1851. But at the end of this video, you'll know exactly what broke.
Because there was quite a few really good German philosophers, and Schopenhauer was one of them.
Who it's hurting most, and why you were right, that something here is deeply wrong. Now, before the 5 pillars, you need to know exactly who Schopenhauer was, because this is real philosophy, not internet commentary. He was a German philosopher writing in 1851, laying out a framework that reads like he knew exactly what was going to happen in our society. He wrote a work called Parerga and Paralipomenia, and inside it, there's a section called Aphorisms on the Wisdom of Life. And in that section, he lays out 3 categories of honor. The first is civic honor, the mutual agreement to respect other people's rights so that they respect yours. And this is the foundation of a functioning society. The second is official honor, the expectation that a person who's holding positions of authority is qualified to be holding it. The third, and the one he spent the most time on, is sexual honor. And here's what separates Schopenhauer from every other talking head on the internet. He wasn't making a moral argument. In his words, all honor really rests upon a utilitarian basis. Utilitarian. It exists because it works, because it holds something together. He did not call sexual honor sacred. He didn't even call it God-given. What he did call it was functional. And then he describes exactly how it functions. He wrote that women, collectively, developed what he called an esprit de corps, a group strategy. And the strategy itself was simple. No woman gives herself to a man except in marriage, enforced collectively, and every man would be, in his words, forced to surrender and ally himself with a woman.
Isn't that strange that he is not being religious, but it is Christians, the Christian philosophy, the Christian religion that preaches this, okay?
And through that arrangement, provision was guaranteed for an entire female race. Sit with that for a second. Schopenhauer was arguing that sexual honor in itself was a female strategy, collectively, to secure long-term commitment, resources, and protection from men. And it only worked if every woman participated. Not fair, not beautiful, not cinematic, just the deal, the structure. And it held 5 things in place. And when that broke, all 5 broke with it. The first thing sexual honor held together was commitment. Schopenhauer described a transaction, and that word feels cold, especially against partnership. But to his defense, he was being honest about what sat beneath the surface.
Well, yeah, and it has to do with the fact as well that you can't base something like a marriage purely on feelings. You just can't, because so much of the marriage has nothing to do with feeling wonderful or feeling in love or that kind of thing, because a lot of stuff is just work. Stuff needs to be done, stuff needs to be prepared, stuff needs to be fixed up again. The house constantly needs attention, the garden needs attention, the kids need attention. So an awful lot of marriage is in fact work, right? So and that needs to be thought about. It's a conscious decision, not a decision by feelings. Now, of course, you need to like each other. There needs to be something there that connects you and that gives you a kind of a common theme in your soul, surely. But the point is that from that alone, you don't have a marriage. You don't have a working marriage, put it that way. That's the point.
Women maintained sexual exclusivity. Men, in exchange, committed fully. Resources, protection, long-term partnership.
And you have to remember, sexual exclusivity means that he gets sex. Do you understand? You can't say, I give myself sexually only to you, but then he doesn't get sex. You're not allowed to do that kind of shit. Because if he doesn't get his thing, you have no right for your thing. That's how deals work. And the weird thing is that sex is not built upon love in this relationship, but sex is built upon a deal. Okay? Because it has to happen, because otherwise you don't make children.
Now I want to be clear, this is not some modernized red pill talking point. This is a philosopher in 1851 describing the architecture of the deal.
Yes, but if you think that modern red pill talking points is, far away from this idea, then you would be wrong too. Like the red pill and people who are in the manosphere, they talk about these things just like this, like Schopenhauer did. And in fact, a lot of them read Schopenhauer. So yes, to a certain degree it is. Now you always have idiots in some sort of a movement or in some sort of group. You always have some idiots, okay? But if you take the idiot to represent the group, then you're a stupid idiot.
Man undertaking responsibility for all women's needs and also for the children that spring from their union, an arrangement on which is based the welfare of the whole female race.
Yes, but the woman takes care of all the man's needs, right?
Both sides had something to lose, and that was the entire point. And the women who broke this agreement, they didn't only affect themselves. She is false to the terms upon which the male capitulated, and as her conduct is such as to frighten other men from making a similar surrender. It imperils the welfare of all of her sisters.
Yeah.
Frighten other men from making a similar surrender. When men see that the deal is broken, they stop making the deal.
Which is completely correct, okay? If you break the contract is broken. You cannot stand there and say you still have to bring in your part of the deal. No. And the deal is broken when a woman doesn't give him any more sex. Sexual exclusivity, right?
And that in itself doesn't hurt one woman. It hurts all women because the system only works if men believe that the terms are reliable. Now, look where we are. The General Social Survey has tracked sexual behavior in the United States for decades. Among women born before 1910, only 3% had 2 or more sexual partners before marriage.
Wow.
3%. By the 1940s birth cohort, that number was 26%. The median number for lifetime sexual partners for women doubled, from 2.6 for women born in the 1940s to 5.3 for women born in the 1970s, a twofold increase in one generation. And the shift was sharper among women than it was for men. By 2013, the CDC found that the gap between men and women in relationship to their lifetime sexual partners was no longer statistically significant. The numbers converged. On a population level, women's sexual behavior became almost indistinguishable from men's.
Now let that sink in. Which is completely crazy. It is crazy because we have a completely different drive. Okay? A man's drive is to penetrate, a woman's drive is to take in. And now all of a sudden, women are behaving like men. Feminism. Feminism is the actual worship of men. It's the worship of masculinity. And it converts, it warps women to become like men. And now their sexual behavior is like men's sexual behavior. Pure jealousy, wanting to be like men, wanting to have what men have. It is completely crazy. And then they pretend as if masculinity is something bad while they worship it. It is absolutely wild.
Statistically speaking, that's the esprit de corps dissolving in the data, Schopenhauer's structure collapsing in real time, measured across generations. And here's what followed. Less than half of American households now include a married couple, 47.1% as of 2024, down from 78.8% in 1949. The average age of first marriages among men is about 30 years old, where for women, it's about 28. And that is the highest ever recorded in American history. And according to the Institute of Family Studies, nearly 3/4 of women, 74%, and 2/3 of men, 64%, between 22 and 35, reported that they hadn't dated, or had only dated a few times in the last year. The report's own name for this is the dating recession. Not my words, the Institute of Family Studies in 2026. And here's the part that nobody really wants to say out loud. Half of these young adults, 51%, said that they actually wanted to start a relationship. They want it, they're just not doing it.
Yeah, because commitment is not a thing anymore. You can't expect commitment anymore. And if you can't expect it, but you want it, you see, if you want something, you don't get it, then obviously there is a kind of a, you could say for a woman, like if she's in love and she doesn't get it, she gets hurt, right? You don't get a reward from your input. You don't go to, you don't keep sitting at a table, you don't get anything to eat. As she said there earlier, that's exactly what's happening here as well.
The gap between desire and action is exactly what Schopenhauer was describing in 1851, 175 years ago. The deal dissolved. Without collective enforcement of exclusivity, men stopped reading commitment as a rational trade. Why surrender your freedom, your resources, your future, when the terms of the commitment are no longer guaranteed? When the structure that once incentivized commitment completely disappears, commitment disappears with it. And again, the people most affected by this are women.
Brilliant, right? Absolutely brilliant. The people who are most negatively affected, this is what you could say out of this, by feminism, are women. Now, we men have suffered this crap severely, but women are going to suffer way more. And they're waking up to this shit right now. That's why you have this type of video. This video wasn't there 5 years ago. Do you understand? This is the kind of stuff that is coming out now because women are really starting to panic. It's going to be beautiful, guys.
This entire system was designed to benefit them. It was their strategy, and they abandoned it.
Imagine. I just get her sweeter eyes here, so freeze frame. Which is quite something, isn't it? That they thought they could get it all. They could get all the power, and they could tell men what to do because men wanted sex with them. Because remember, what the only input of a woman is sexual exclusivity. If that's the case, then that was the only thing that they actually had to deal with. Okay? Now when you have, as soon as the sex robots are out and cheap enough for, any man to buy one, and they're AI and they can have conversations with him and so on, intelligent conversations, and are sweet and nice to them, and you have to look at the robotics. They can walk down the road with you at this stage. They're just way too expensive, but that's going to change. Women are going to be obsolete. Okay? Now, the human race is finished, of course, after that. But, I mean, the whore of Babylon is going to fall. And it's going to fall with a smack and a bang. It's going to be savage.
Felt like everybody says that they want a relationship, but nobody knows how to actually build one. You're not imagining that. The gap is the exact thing that Schopenhauer described, and you are standing inside of it right now. But the people who cannot pair up are not the ones who pay the most. The heaviest cost falls onto the people who never had a say in any of it. And the numbers there are worse than almost anybody is willing to say out loud. The second thing that sexual honor held together was children. The system was never only just about the two adults who
Oh, wow. No shit, Sherlock.
were making the deal. It was about what the deal produced. Children born into a structure where both parents were invested, where the man's commitment included responsibility for the offspring, and where the woman's commitment and honor gave the man confidence that the women's children were his. Now that might sound really uncomfortable in 2026, but that is what the mechanism was. Paternity confidence was the engine underneath a lot of this. Without it, the man's surrender made almost no common sense, especially biologically. And Schopenhauer was very blunt about what happened when women broke this commitment. Any girl who commits a breach of the rule betrays the whole female race, because its welfare would be destroyed if every woman were to do likewise.
Exactly.
The punishment was social exile. She'd be cast out with shame and avoided like the plague.
By women. Women would do this. Right? Men would just avoid them, but women would throw them out of the society. They would actually hunt them out of the village, and they would be exiled never to come back.
Not cruelty for its own sake, enforcement. Because if one woman could break the structure without competence, the whole system weakened. Now look where we are. 1 in 4 American children, roughly 19 million kids, are growing up within a household without their biological, step, or adoptive father. The United States has the highest rate of children living in single-parent households of any nation in a 130-country global study. That's more than 3 times the global average. And this isn't static. The number of children in father-absent homes has more than doubled since 1970. Roughly half of Black children.
No. That's like 75% of Black children, okay? These numbers are skewed. It's like 75% of Black children, almost at 80% now, are in single mother households. Single mother households, okay? And it is incredible what kind of effect that has. But that's for another video.
29% of Hispanic children and 20% of white children currently live in homes with no father present. Now these are Census Bureau numbers, published by the National Institute of Demographic Studies, and the outcomes are measurable. Children in fatherless homes face statistically higher rates of poverty, behavioral problems, lower educational attainment, and incarceration.
Yeah, and that's really nice. Like, I mean, if that was the only thing, it would be really nice. But 75% of all kids on drugs are a single mother household. 70% of all kids on the street are from single mother households. 80 to 85% of all aggressive rapes are done by kids, men, all right, or people who come from a single mother household. Like, try to imagine that. Rape. I mean, it's a mother. Single mother. Why would they turn out to be aggressive in that manner? No. These are nice statistics. You know, if that was the only thing that happened, it would be fine.
Now, here's where Bonnie Blue becomes relevant again. 3 men believe that they might be the father of her child. She filmed the ultrasound. She monetized the announcement. Paternity confidence here doesn't approach 0. It gets turned into content. Schopenhauer described a system where children were a product of mutual investment and mutual certainty. What we're looking at now is a world where a child can be conceived in a room with 400 different strangers, and the question of who the father is becomes a form of entertainment. Now, Schopenhauer, he wouldn't be surprised. He named this mechanism. When the esprit de corps dissolves, when paternity confidence collapses, when commitment becomes optional, children are the first collateral damage every single time.
Yeah.
And here's what makes this really hard to talk about. The conversation around fatherhood has become so politically loaded to the point where stating basic, clear census data feels controversial. But again, these aren't value judgments. These aren't opinions. They're data. They are structural outcomes. Remove the structure that incentivized a 2-parent investment, and what do you get? Fewer 2-parent homes. The children didn't choose this. The structure failed them. And whether
It's women that failed them. Okay? It's not the structure. The structure was fine. Women betrayed the structure. Why don't you just say it, Kate?
Whether or not you plan to ever have children, you are dating and building a life inside of this culture that produces these outcomes.
Oh Christ, we're all poor little creatures. It's feminism.
The odds a relationship lasts, the level of trust in which you start from, all of this was shaped by whether the structure held in homes like the ones that you grew up in. Now, here's the part that turns this whole story around. Everybody assumes that a system or a structure like this was created to serve men. It didn't. It was created to support the group that is now paying the consequences for this collapse. And once you truly objectively look at who that is, this argument stops being the one that you expected.
Yes. And it's not, it was there to protect women, and women are responsible for destroying it.
The third thing that sexual honor held together is the one thing most people don't want to listen to. The esprit de corps existed to protect women. As a class, as a group, its entire focus was to give women security and leverage over men. And Schopenhauer was not subtle about this. Women have to band together with a show of esprit de corps and present one undivided front to their common enemy, man, who possesses all the good things of the earth, in virtue of his superior physical and intellectual power, in order to lay siege to and conquer him, and so get possession of him and a share of those good things.
Pretty amazingly well said, right? I mean, there's a couple of things that are said in here that's quite amazing. He's, because he possesses all the good things on earth in virtue of his superior physical and intellectual power. And because women pretend as if that's not the case, and they're just as powerful and just as strong and just as independent and just as intellectually capable as men, they have destroyed their own security. And now they're pretty much fucked.
Common enemy, lay siege, conquer. This is extreme framing. But outside of the language, look at what he's actually describing. The only leverage women had historically, the ability to control access to sex in exchange for long-term commitment. That was the strategy. And it worked precisely because it was collective. Because
Yes, as long as there was access to sex. And the thing is, you see, as soon as men will wake up to the fact, and this is the Bible told them, like, you know, you need to be celibate. You need to know what celibacy is and how to control your own sexuality, otherwise women will control you. They don't even have to do that anymore because women wanted to control everything, and now they're whores and men can just fuck whenever they want to because all these women are just whores.
one woman acting alone has no real power. Women acting together creates scarcity, and scarcity creates leverage. That leverage is what forced men to agree to the commitment of the terms, and he was very clear about what happened to any woman who broke this rank. She is cast out with shame as one who has lost her honor. No woman will have anything more to do with her. She is avoided like the plague. The punishment in this did not come from men. It came from other women.
There you go.
Because every woman who broke the rule, she weakened the leverage for all women. Collective enforcement for collective benefit.
That's why women didn't like whores.
Now again, look what happened when this dissolved. A study published in Evolutionary Psychology in July 2025, spanning 5,331 participants across 15 samples in 11 countries. What they found was the number of past sexual partners is inversely correlated with how desirable they are as a long-term partner.
Exactly. The more sexual partners a woman has, the less desirable she is. Also, the less she will actually get married and stay in that marriage. Women that didn't have any sexual partners before marriage have the greatest possibility and probability of staying together for a marriage their whole life.
Meaning, the higher the body count is, the less willing people are to commit. And this held regardless of gender. There was no meaningful double standard in this data. Meanwhile, 83% of women say that they prefer a committed relationship in comparison to uncommitted sex. 83% of them. And counselors who do work with students report that there's a long-term monogamous relationship described, almost without exception, as a desired goal. So women overwhelmingly want committed partners, but the system designed to produce them is almost gone.
And who destroyed it? Say it, Kate.
And you might ask, what replaced it? Well, OnlyFans now hosts an approximate 4.6 million creators.
Wow.
The majority of them, women, commodifying sexual access for profit.
It's not just the majority. I mean, the majority would be 51%. It's like over 90% or something.
instead of collective leverage. And women's self-reported levels of happiness has also declined, both absolutely and relative to men's, especially since the 1970s.
I might be wrong about that, of course, but that's the kind of feel that you get from it, don't you?
That's Stevenson and Wolfers out of Yale and Wharton. Peer-reviewed, real data. The unspoken agreement that women had was women collectively controlling access to protect every woman's future and their children. When it broke, yes, women gained independent sexual freedom, but they lost collective bargaining power. The marketplace shifted from what are you offering to earn exclusive access into how do you compete for attention in a market that has no barrier to entry. And I want to be clear because I already know what the comments are going to say. So you want me to go back to the 1950s? No, I want you to understand what you lost so that you can make an informed choice about what comes next. You cannot fix anything if you refuse to acknowledge what caused it to break.
And by the way, I mean, have a look at the women in the 1950s. Have a look at them. They were beautiful. I mean, it's just beautiful looking. The whole thing, the skirts down to their knees, and the whole mannerism, and look at the men. You know, look at their they had their beautiful suits and the long coats and stuff like that. Man, society, like the people looked awesome. They just looked really, really cool. I love movies from that time, or when they do kind of movies and they go back to that, you know, and you see them with their hats and stuff. It looked awesome.
Because Schopenhauer, he called this utilitarian, and he was right. The esprit de corps was a utility. It performed a function. And when it was removed, nothing replaced the function. Women were told they gained freedom, and in some important ways, they did. But freedom without structure is just chaos with better branding. And data, it shows what's actually happening in the outcomes, not what you're told is happening on TikTok. Women report consistently being less happy now than they were when the system was intact. That is a measurable result. And the people most harmed by the collapse of female collective strategy are women. Now, whether you're a man or a woman, you are standing in the exact market that this collapse has created. And you can feel the difference even if you haven't been able to directly tie a number to it. But
it's an interesting way of putting it into words. I think the collapse has created it. And who created the collapse? Feminism. Say it, Kate. I mean, she does say it in other videos, by the way. But I just want to demonstrate while she's talking. She kind of avoids making those points. I think it has to do with the fact that she wants to stick to the topic by just, avoiding saying the one thing out loud, which would just simply, conclude the video, kind of, and it would be over.
Underneath the leverage and the freedom, the old system quietly produced one more thing, and it doesn't show up in marriage rates or happiness scores. You likely can't even point to it directly, and most people, they only notice it after it's already gone. The last thing that sexual honor held together was trust. This one is harder to quantify, but that doesn't mean it's not the most important.
Actually, it is the most important. You need to trust one another. And trust is earned. You don't just get trust, okay? All the other points are there to trust. If she doesn't have sex with him, there's no reason for him to trust her, okay? Because, I mean, she's gonna, the sexual access to her, somebody else is getting it. And somebody else is supposed to get it, or whatever, right? Sexual access is the thing that she's going to have to guarantee him. You see what I'm saying? Not just the concept of it, but the actual access.
Because Schopenhauer's entire framework of honor, all three categories, they rest on the same principle. Shared expectations produce cooperative behavior.
Amazing.
Civic honor worked because people agreed upon what was fair. Official honor worked because people agreed on what qualified some.
Yeah, that kind of that's gone too, right? I mean, we need to get back to that civil official honor as well, like all these politicians are not qualified, and what actually qualifies them at all? Because they want to. That's why women should not be in politics. Nothing qualifies them to be a politician. Get the fuck out of this thing. The same with priests and in church, preaching and all the rest of that. Women are not qualified for this. And that's another topic for another day.
Especially to be in a position of power. And sexual honor worked because both sexes agreed to the terms. Men knew the deal, women knew the deal, and everybody operated inside the framework. And that shared framework created something fragile that we don't talk about enough. Trust between men and women as groups. Now, again, look where we are. In 1972, 46% of Americans said that most people can be trusted. By 2018, that number dropped to 34%. In a 2023 and 2024 Pew survey, it was still 34%.
Wow.
25% of men ages 15 to 34 report feeling lonely a lot of the time. This is the highest rate of any country in the OECD. In no other country is the gap between male loneliness, especially in young men, compared to everybody else, as wide as it is here. 15% of men now report 0 close friendships, a 5-fold increase since the 1990s.
Wow.
And among men under 30, more than 1 in 4 said they have no close social connections at all.
I mean, that's 30 years. It multiplied by 5 in 30 years. That's just absolutely incredible.
And here's a number that puts it all together. 44% of single young men say that they fear being labeled as creepy, and that makes them less likely to approach women.
That was a trick of women to get men to back off, right? And to kind of give men that weird feeling, right? So, I mean, there's no complaining whatsoever that men don't approach anymore. Like, I mean, you women, you bitches can just fuck off. But I'm not really a bitch. How the hell is a man supposed to know? That's why she's talking about the trust between the groups, women and men. That's why there was typical manly behavior and typical female behavior, so that the groups could trust one another. If there's too many women too loud about men being creepy, and other women just simply accept that, then these accepting women, those women that say, they don't fight against other women doing this, then there's no need for men to trust them because they're obviously of the same opinion.
At the same time, 77% of women, ages 18 to 30, say that they wish men would approach them more. Let's put
Who gives a fuck?
those numbers together again side by side. Men are afraid to engage. Women are waiting for engagement.
And they're not afraid to engage. And you put that wrong. It's written there properly. Fear to be called creepy. Because that goes along with their reputation. You understand? And a man and his reputation, that's a very important thing. Okay? You can't just fuck up a man's reputation. It's the only thing he has. Alright? So if you make them creepy, that's really fucked up his reputation. No. He's not afraid to approach.
Neither side trusts the other one enough to close that gap. When the shared rules dissolved, what replaced them wasn't true freedom. It was suspicion. Men and women stopped trusting each other because the shared framework that they had was no longer there. Everybody's playing by different rules and reading every interaction through a different lens. Men, they're calculating risk before they ever open their mouths.
By the way, this is not really true either. Women trusted in that men wouldn't do anything to them. And they didn't. They just backed off. You see? So they could trust men that men wouldn't do anything to them as such. They're not getting raped by white men in white countries. They're getting raped by men that they imported. Okay?
And women are sitting there wondering why nobody's approaching them. And neither group truly understands and is willing to accept why the other one is behaving the way that it is. Schopenhauer's sexual honor conversation, on its principle, it gave both sexes a map. You might not have loved the map. You might even wanted a different map, but at least it told you where you were standing. And right now, nobody knows where they're standing. And the result is a generation that is more digitally connected than any generation before, yet more isolated relationally than any generation we've ever measured. And if talking to somebody that you're actually attracted to feels heavier than it should, that's not a flaw in you. It is what happens when two groups stop sharing the same rules. So we're all trying to play a game where nobody can agree upon how it works. Now, underneath all 4 of these things sits a 5th. And it's the one thing Schopenhauer cared about more than any of the first. It's also the hardest to defend in front of a modern audience. Because at first, it's going to sound like the opposite of freedom. The 5th thing that sexual honor held together was restraint itself.
Amazing. But it's not restraint in a man wanting sex from his woman. It's a restraint from a man going out and having sex with other women. Okay? Just saying.
To understand this one, you must understand Schopenhauer beyond this essay. His broader philosophy, laid out in the world as will and representation. It was built on a single idea, the will, the blind, insatiable force of desire that drives all living things.
Yeah, and actually, it should be translated the want. Okay? I shall not want. The wanting. because will is something, it's a little bit different. But that's what it's, how you say it in German, right? If you want something, you say, ich will, I want. And that's why it's translated as the will. It's not really will in English, it's want, just so that you understand what he means.
He argued that this will, this appetite, this impulse, it was the root of all suffering. And not because wanting things is wrong, but because the will has no off switch.
Well, the will actually can. The will can be activated to switch off, but not the want. It always wants more. The want has no off switch. It always wants more. That's because it's the nature of wanting, right? If you put it in a jar, the want in a jar, all you have in that jar is want. It's not a direction of any kind. It's just want. Now, and you put that want into a man. He wants a woman. He wants this. He wants that. Right? But it's all masculine. You put that want into an animal. It will want the things that this particular animal needs to survive and stuff. Want, it cannot do anything else but to want, and that's why it has no off switch. The will, to as we know it, if you say you have small willpower, for instance, if the more willpower you have, the more willpower you could use to kind of like, for instance, stop smoking and stuff like that, right? You need willpower for that. So that's why in German it's much easier to understand what he's saying.
It always wants more, and if that's left unchecked, it will destroy everything around it. Civilization, in his view, was the set of structures that channeled the will. That said, you can want, but you can't just take. You have desires, but you have to earn the right to act on them. And sexual honor was one of those structures. It took the most powerful human impulse and it placed it inside a framework of rules, consequences, and mutual obligation.
And that's the case with every want. Every want has to be put into a certain framework where you could say, for instance, okay, I've reached what I wanted. Okay, I've set a limit to how far I want to go with this, and when I've reached it, I will be satisfied. Okay, so then I would celebrate or something like that. That's why we have kind of those kind of things like a celebration and stuff. And I will celebrate having reached that point, and I will be happy with that point. I will force myself to be happy with that point in time, or that point in development, because that's what I set, where I set the framework to be.
Restraint in that context, it wasn't repression, it was architecture. It was what made cooperation between the sexes possible. Now look where we are. 87% of men between the ages of 18 and 35, they view pornography at least once a week. Among women in the same age group, 28.5%.
Which is already crazy that women, 28% of women, that's a third of women approximately, watch porn at least once a week is quite incredible. Because it's not anything that women really get anything from. That's quite incredible. That's because women need to have an orgasm just as much as men do. Where men, just get an orgasm. Women, it's much more difficult. But there's a reason for that, because it's like sex is actually not there to be sex. It was there to reproduce, to have children. And in order to have children, the man has to have an orgasm. He has to. A woman doesn't have to have an orgasm in order to get pregnant. That's why it's put the way it is.
The average boy is exposed to pornography as early as 10 years old.
That's fucking crazy. That is absolutely crazy. And there has to be a motivation behind that. There has to be. And there also has to be a motivation why we give kids at 10 years old a handy where they can just access the internet and stuff like that. This is absolutely crazy. This is and it's the fault of parents. And how many single mother households do we have?
Before most boys have ever had a real conversation with a girl about what a relationship even looks like. A simulation of sexual access introduced before any framework for what real connection requires. In 1990, 55% of American adults ages 18 to 64 reported having sex at least once a week. By 2024, that number had fallen to 37%. Wow. We live in the most sexually accessible environment in human history. Porn is free. Dating apps are everywhere. Hookup culture is mainstream. And people are having less sex than at any point since we started measuring this. Among adults 18 to 29, 24% report having zero sex in the last year.
Isn't that amazing? That's like a quarter of people didn't have any sex at all last year. That's one thing in a year, by the way. Okay, that's the one thing. But imagine that all this sexual freedom has brought it to the point that people are not having sex. Of course, because it just makes everything. It's just like if everything is always in your face, you back away from it. You know, this is complete crazy shit.
That's double the rate from 2010. So we have more access, less connection, and that's the product of a culture that removed the structure and never replaced the function. Schopenhauer would look at this day and say, of course, the will without any form of structure doesn't lead to satisfaction. It leads to consumption. And consumption without meaning or restraint, that doesn't produce connection. It produces addiction. And pornography is the clearest example of this.
Yeah.
Stimulated sexual access with zero risk, zero vulnerability, zero investment. And 87% of men consume it weekly because the structure that once channeled desire towards partnership with boundaries and restraint and commitment and honor, that's gone. And what filled the void is a multi-billion-dollar industry built to exploit the will with no friction.
Exactly. And who are they? Who are those people who are exploiting all of that? Who are those people who are tempting everybody to go there and go and get more and more and more? Who?
The old system said, you can have this, but you must sacrifice something in order to have it, aka you have to earn it. The new system says you can have stimulation for free and you never have to do anything to earn it. And then we act confused as to why real, true, honest relationships aren't forming. Schopenhauer described the will as a central force of human existence. And he described civilization as a set of structures that are designed to channel it. And
Exactly, because look, if you have a want, because it's want is the proper translation. If you have a want gives you power, like it moves things, right? Without us wanting anything, we wouldn't even move, and there would be nothing. We wouldn't have produced anything like houses, roads, cars, handies, everything, right? We wouldn't have produced anything done by men, by the way, if there wasn't a want. But so the want is very important, but if there's no structure to the want, you're just sitting there wanting, but you don't know what, and you don't know how. And because all that is being fed is the want, people don't know how to anymore. And they don't want to accept structures because they think that structures, as feminism preaches, structures is just a repression, oppression, and etc.
sexual honor was one of the most important channels. It took the strongest drive that humans have, and it placed it inside of a container with rules, expectations, and mutual accountability. If you remove the container, the drive doesn't go away. What it does is it finds new outlets: porn, parasocial relationships, apps optimized for swiping rather than connecting.
Exactly, but it just goes mental case. The whole thing just goes crazy. That's all it does.
These outlets that feed the will without ever actually satisfying it. Because the will, as Schopenhauer told us, is insatiable if there's no underlying meaning associated with it.
Of course, because you need meaning to things that are there. Otherwise, you don't know why you're doing them. The want itself is actually quite, like for instance, the sexual drive. It is an annoying motherfucker. It is just annoying. Unless there is some sort of a meaning. And what it does is it brings men and women together. And what happens when you come together in the most, the best case scenario, they fall in love, and they will discover something that needs, people need to be with one another to fall in love, and love will develop. And then all of a sudden you have an actual meaning to the whole thing.
No honor, no boundaries, no rules, no restraint. It will always want more. And unfortunately, it will consume whatever you put in front of it. The old system said, you want this, then you need to become somebody worth committing to. The new system says, here's a simulation, and you never need to become anything in order to have it. And we're measuring the results in real time. And if you find yourself listening to this in the generation that has access to more things than any generation before you, yet still feeling emptier than you expected or were promised to, that's not a personal failing. That's your desire with nothing purposeful to channel it in.
Which is a personal feeling. Okay? Stop making excuses for people, Kate. Stop it.
The structure was removed, and you're the one who's paying for it. With all 5 laid out side by side, the pattern here is impossible to miss. 5 things this structure was holding up, and 1 question left that the people who are arguing about this every single day refuse to touch. Schopenhauer never predicted Bonnie Blue. He never predicted OnlyFans, or swiping, or sexting, or meaningless relationships. He described a structure. He described what it was holding together, and he...
No, Schopenhauer didn't predict that, but the Bible did. It predicted the whore of Babylon. It predicted the whore sitting upon the beast, drinking the blood of the wise. It did actually predict it. Isn't that amazing?
Described in precise detail what would unravel when it came apart. Commitment would become conditional, and the men would stop surrendering when the terms felt unreliable. Children would lose the stability of 2 invested parents. Paternity confidence would erode, and with it, the incentive for lifelong fatherhood. Women would lose collective bargaining power. Individual sexual freedom would come at the cost of group leverage, and the people most harmed by that trade-off would be women themselves.
Would be women, yeah. There you go.
Trust between the sexes would collapse, because without shared rules, the only thing left to take its place is suspicion, and a culture that was previously built on honor, values, and restraint would be replaced by a culture built on entitlement and impulse, desire without structure, access without investment, consumption without connection. Now he wasn't a prophet. He was an engineer reading a blueprint. He looked at the load-bearing walls and told us what they were holding up. The building fell exactly where those walls were. And the part that should bother you most, he told us in 1851 that sexual honor was utilitarian, that it didn't survive because it was moral. It survived because it worked. And we didn't replace it with something better. We didn't build a new system, new rules, and new structures. We didn't replace it with anything to hold together commitment, family, female security, social trust, or restraint. We just removed it, and we told ourselves that removing it was the same thing as progress. The truth is, the data doesn't care what we call it. Now, to be clear, Schopenhauer wasn't a fantastic person. He was difficult, often cruel, pessimistic, and cynical, and he held a lot of views about women that people today would find offensive.
Yeah, I will stop it here because I can tell you something, and all these views that he had about women were absolutely correct. Okay? Another thing is that women wanting the same kind of sexual treatment from men as men would expect from women would change the deal. Okay? And that is very important, because when you change the deal in that way, then women have gotten what the man has got. So if she trades sexual access for the for the man, right? They both give themselves and each other sexuality and sex. Then the deal is already done. Then there's no need for commitment either, by the way. So remember what the deal is. It is sexual access for commitment. Okay? The man does not have any sexual, let's say, responsibility towards the woman. Now, of course, it would be kind of stupid if you didn't, if you weren't concerned at all about her, let's say, sexual happiness. But by right, that's not part of the deal. Okay? Then you would have to go to Christianity, but then you have another deal going there altogether. She is a servant to the man then, okay? And so on and so on. I don't want to get into that too deeply. But I really, really like the way she put that together. The way she pulls all these statistics and stuff is quite cool. And the statistics are actually worse than she describes, because you have to take into all sorts of other things into account that I don't want to get into now either, because I think it's enough. That's enough. It's a very gentle way of looking at this, and which I think she wants to reach women with this, okay? And say, look, you're going to have to get down off your high horse. You're just going to have to do that. Otherwise, like, you have ruined yourself forever. Now, be careful with this. It's going to hurt, and it's going to hurt you women the most of all. Men will find some way around this. Think about that. Anyway, I think that was very educational, and it was deep and educational and cool and all of that. And so I think that was enough for this week. So, I wish you a lovely week, and all that's left to do is to say, God bless you all. Till next time, bye-bye.